episode on our YouTube channel and our 10th episode on our brand new podcast. So it's only fitting that I have actually one of our favorite guests ever, Megan Ely, but we'll talk more about her in just a second. I just want to actually talk a little bit about the show and the fact that over the last 30 episodes, we have covered a ton of wedding subjects. I mean, we've talked about mental health, contracts, estate planning, the do's and don'ts. We've had incredible guests. We've even talked about IVF and reproduction, and all of it. Every time I think that we have covered it all, something else pops up. And I'm excited to announce that the future also continues to have these incredible guests, because we do have a reporter from the New York Times. We have the CFO of All Seated. We have the owner of the largest wedding expo companies in the world. All of these guests are going to be on Behind the Veil between now and the end of the year. So it's jam-packed. So I hope you join us every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, because it's incredible. And I'm just so excited, honestly, because we wouldn't be where we are today without you guys out there watching this show every week. I mean, the fact that David Caruso's episode has 6,000 views on YouTube just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. So thank you to everybody that has made up this show a success. And part of that success, obviously, is our Behind the Veil crew. Obviously, Marcy Gutenberg with An Affair to Remember has been with us since the beginning. Marcy, I can't believe it. It's our 30th episode. What?
Hi, Keith. This is just so exciting that we have so many great viewers and they're out there listening to you and us. It's just the information has been endless.
I know. And you know, it was originally we were just, you know, a Zoom call between planners talking back and forth. And the fact that we've expanded it to include so many guests and so many different subjects has just been incredible. So and you've been with us since the very beginning, and I'm so excited about moving forward. Next is Tyler Black with Cachet Events. Hi, Tyler.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back, Tyler. You look great for somebody that's, recovering.
Thank you. I'm always recovering from something.
I'm just saying your voice is all deep and sexy today, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm very I think I got congested on a flight.
Fingers crossed. I know that,
but there's no COVID. Already been tested.
I was about to say, because now testing has become just part of our routine. And then of course Brooke Logan Stoner. Hello, Brooke.
Salutations, Max. How is everybody?
It's good. Oh, look at your eyes. Oh, you've got it going on today with the eyes.
I'm in the Christmas spirit. We're getting green today.
As we can tell. So guys, again, I can't believe it's our 30th episode, and I'm even more excited about our guest because she is actually a fan favorite. She's one of my favorite. It's Megan Ely with OFD Consulting. Megan, it is great to have you back with us.
Oh, yay. God. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me back. Happy and congrats on your 30th. That's amazing.
It really is. And honestly, I did a little pre-show on Facebook Live talking about just the influence that you've had on me personally. You know, the fact that, I've now been in New York Times. Well, New York Times is this weekend, by the way, FYI for anybody watching. U.S. News, World and Report, Parade Magazine, all of this is because of the stuff that you shared literally on this show. And it is.
You're making us famous, gal.
I know. It's going to be impossible to be with before I know it.
I know.
New York Times.
But it's mind blowing because it's all this information that you just provided free, that you just said, look, this is stuff that's out there. If you have the time and some intuition and some ability to do some writing, get out there and do this. And, the very first thing I want to bring up is HARO, help a reporter out. Yes. I mean, I think this is the most underused resource that is out there. Can you tell everybody a little bit about HARO?
Yeah, absolutely. So HARO is Help a Reporter Out. And essentially it was created by Peter Shankman, who is a major publicity god to a lot of people, including myself. And he created this many, many years ago. It's gone through a few owners' hands at this point, but it basically said everyone's an expert, right? We are all experts at something. And so the way it worked was You sign up for free. There are paid subscriptions, which I can answer questions on that too, which I'm a part of, but you can do it for free. And you sign up. And then so Monday through Friday, 3 times a day, with the exception of holidays, you get these emails. And it's anywhere, Keith, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's anywhere between 20 and like 100 press leads. It's journalists already working on things. So instead of, because we've talked before about, and you can go and research writers and pitch them ideas, and that is absolutely a viable way to do it. But if you're really newer to the side of things, and that's a great example of you joining here, and maybe it made more sense to be productive this way, to do it this way, you get from Parade, you get from, sometimes it's anonymous, and then later you find out it's the New York Times, which is a wonderful surprise. You always wanted to go in that direction, and they will literally say, I'm working, like Parade, right? I know, because I worked with the writer directly on that one, but you worked through HARO with that, which is amazing. And she said, I wanted trends, or I wanted this, or I wanted that. And then she'll literally say, this is exactly what I need from you. And your job is literally say, this is who I am. Here's my exact answers. You make sure you're robust at it, which, Keith, I know you've since joined the collective, and I know you're very good at responding to. And from there, you will find out potentially if you get published, and it's free. I mean, there are paid versions and things like that, but it's a great free resource for those dipping their toes into that. I mean, the New York Times, it's crazy.
It's great. I mean, and it's actually one of 3 articles that are coming out, by the way. No,
that deserves a hair flip.
I know.
Am I right?
So, and it's so funny because I've learned a lot going through this process, because, obviously I think HARO was actually the best way to kind of get an idea of what PR is, how to get in front of people, what the pitches work, what pitches don't, and a lot of times you don't even know your stuff is being produced, because honestly, reporters are really busy. And so sometimes you do a search and all of a sudden, a new article pops up. Like I just moving.com recently had something where it said a little something on it, but all that stuff counts. And I think I pay like $19 a month, because, it allows you to do ask one thing, like for Behind the Veil. I did it so that way I can ask.
Oh, that's great. Absolutely. But you can do a lot with the free. And and to your point, yes. I mean, it's up to you to track what's been picked up. I think I've mentioned this before, but for anyone listening, Talk Walker Alert, it's a free alert system. Put your name in there and your name will pop up when new stuff comes in. Oftentimes I scoop the writer and let them know that something's gone live, that's the relationship we have with them at this point. But it's, it's a lot of work to keep up with that sometimes. So a little bit of heavy lifting on that side, but it's worth it.
Well, I have to tell you that the 3 times a day and having to read, quickly scan, I've gotten to be a master when it comes to scanning those subjects.
Oh, good.
It takes a little time to, go through it. And actually, I think we've had Dr. Tanya Paradas on here, who is a psychologist, and I've actually forwarded her a bunch of articles that she started doing. So she's been published now.
Awesome.
It's just one of those things. It's really a community builder, and I love that for a show like this. But let me go back, because I just basically said Megan Ely with OFD Consulting, and I didn't really even talk about you or.
That's okay. You don't have to. I've already been on. I'm just one of the gang now.
You're literally one of the top consulting businesses in the country that is literally wedding focused, right?
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. I guess I'm not going to be my own publicist. We are one of very few out there, and I would contend we're up there, and I'm proud of the work that we do and the people we represent. That's like a publicist answer, isn't it?
It really is. But, I talked so much on the last show that I wanted to actually open it up to our Behind the Veil crew to talk about, because, each of these guys are an owner of a small business. Marcy is obviously an Affair to Remember by Marcy, which is an invitation store, invitation company. And Tyler Black, obviously, is the owner of Cachet Events. Do you guys have some beginner questions that maybe some of our listeners out there would want to ask, that you're I'm just into this world of PR? What are some great first steps? Let's just start that. What are some great first steps for a brand new business, or somebody that's just dipping their toe besides HARO?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. So first thing first, it doesn't hurt. Okay, this is going to sound a little bit boring. It's like, oh, this isn't the sexy part of
anything you could
PR.
say could come out.
No, it's not the sexy part of PR because they want me to say, oh, you pitched the New York Times, of course. But no, first and foremost, you need to talk about your goals here. And Keith, I know that's something you've thought about too. It's if you're new and starting out, really any part of being a small business owner, you only have 24 hours in a day. And if anyone can figure out how to do that, otherwise, let me know. I'm always looking to increase. And, you have to be able to be very careful with your time, no matter what, especially during the pandemic. And so what do you want? What would make this successful? What has to happen in order for this to be a success? What has to happen? And of course, you might say New York Times, but you can be a little more, you don't have to be as granular as that. You can say, well, I want to be able to impress the couples that come to my site. I want to be able to take certain weddings and get them published so that people see me and potentially hire me. All sorts of different reasonings. I want to build eventually a diverse revenue stream in the B2B market and be an educator. And I want that. So you're just going to ask, what has to happen for this to be a success? Is it for SEO purposes? Is it for impressing people when they come and say, as seen in all of these amazing places, including moving.com or whatever? No, moving.com is great for SEO. So I think that's wonderful. And you've got to start there. What has to happen to be a success? And really, I find it's human nature. We're going to go after things that are easier to execute. I mean, I think that's just even the most hardest working persons so it is. What are your strengths? Is it speaking? Is it writing? Keith, I'm going to embarrass you for a second, but you're a very good writer. Now that you've joined the collective and I've intimately gotten to see your responses to things, you're clearly a good writer. Not everyone is good as writer as you. And so if their strength is in a different area where they're better suited, you got to figure out those things early. And what's your area of expertise? I mean, anyone can say weddings. Well, that's great. But what aspects of wedding planning? What parts of it? Some people are amazing at dealing with all the family parts of it, which you may not think is something. Maybe they want to stay with decor and style, like the design. Maybe it's destination. So really get to the nitty gritty of that and set yourself some goals up from there. And then from there, you just make sure your website, I'll leave this because I want more questions here. I'll leave it at this, but you also want to take a few minutes to make sure that your website is up to snuff, because anytime you're putting money into or time into PR, advertising, marketing, I don't care what it is, you're sending people to your site, and I would probably say Instagram, right? For the most part. I mean, fight me on that because it could be Facebook or YouTube, but those are the main ones. Yeah, no, fight me. All the way in Richmond here. I'm such a baby. You'd win from that. But you want to make sure that your site's where you want it to be, because Keith, what if, I'm going to put this on you for a second. What if you get all these great things popping up, but then your site was a hot mess express? You know what I mean? People would go to the site and it wouldn't convert. So why did you do it? And so for me, when I know I have big podcasts coming out, even for OFD Consulting, I make sure that my bio is up to date. All my contact information's there. For you guys, a lot of you on the B2C side, it's going to be, I'll make sure my portfolio, my press page. For me, it's more my press page, awards, bios, like all the, B2B stuff. But just, those are the few steps to get you started. It sounds like a lot, but really it's sitting yourself down with a cup of coffee or whatever your poison, not wine, because then you come up with all these other ideas.
Exactly. And then it goes,
bad ideas.
Been there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I realized that as I was going through these pitches and stuff, I realized that my strength was being a practical planner, because there were lots of people that were giving these luxury ideas, these unique ideas, and my responses are very practical. Like these
people love that.
Right. And I find that the more practical they are, the more like there's one that I'm actually writing for you about like the things people forget about doing an outdoor wedding. And
good. Yeah, that's a good one that we're working on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I talk about dirt in my piece to you, about people forget about dirt. People forget about restrooms. People forget about, that restroom experience. As lovely as that sounds, a lot of people make kind of like their judgment about a wedding about how nice the restroom is, that stuck with me way back in my Hyatt days, because we had a bar mitzvah and one of the ladies came out and was like, that restroom's disgusting, I'm leaving. I was like,
You got to
Okay.
remember those things. Yeah. And so sometimes the practical and unsexy are actually the most productive ways to get into PR. You know, my press for myself, I don't talk a lot about how to get into getting into Vogue is great. Getting Harper's Bazaar is great. But if there's more practical ways to go about things, like that's going to be more productive for the audience, that's my route as well. So I get that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that and I mean, we said New York Times multiple times, like name drop. But honestly,
That's fun to drop, though.
I know, but I feel like, it's those other things, because when somebody research says, finds me on the Knot and then does a Google search, Keith Willard events, I want all those things to show up. I want all those articles and all those websites to show up, because it says, oh, he's known as an expert. I can't tell you if I'm actually an expert. I can tell you that, I've written some great stuff that I feel is practical, but still, that was my whole goal. And you said about setting goals. That was my whole goal from the very beginning. It's
I think we can all assume right now, especially as we head into what, I really hope is going to be a robust year for people. I really hope when news of vaccines and, we're rescheduling and postponing and it's going to be a busy year, is take the time now to set the stage and leverage social proof. And social proof is, things like testimonials, what have you, but it's also people quoting you, which builds up your expertise. Like, build that in now and, do that before we head into the busier times.
So I'm going to ask a question based on like Marcy's business, because, Marcy has an invitation specialty business. That doesn't have like the same, like my business being a wedding planner has a lot of opportunity out there to respond to stuff. Is it appropriate for somebody like Marcy, who's been in the business for years and years and years, to respond to some of these great pitches out there as an expert, because she is?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I get a lot when people are asking about wedding PR, right? They'll say one of the pushbacks is the real weddings. And I'm like, that works for planners and venues and photographers and florists and like event designers, not for everybody. But then on the other side, the insight, it is just natural that planners, I would say, and the venues are kind of the people who have most of the touch points. Everyone has a very integral role. So don't get me wrong, everyone's important, but these guys have the most touch points if it's a full service venue or really the planners. So they're probably going to chime in more often than not. It might be a little bit easier for them to chime in. Like I don't want to say easier. It's easier for them to recognize how they can lend themselves to the article. But what I tell people all the time is just an added step when it comes to invitations, entertainment, photography, all of this. So if you get a general, let's talk about the example of it was about outdoor weddings, right? Like ins and outs of outdoor weddings and things like that. Right. So if you're asking someone, that's an article we're writing right now for one of the Isle Society blogs, actually, shout out to them. And we ask, and it's like, well, tell me about the outdoor stuff. Well, a planner's like boom, 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 or venue. But then you've got a photographer who hopefully will chime in, may have to think for a second and say, how can I insert photography in this? Talk about the lighting. Talk about the lighting and what that's going to look like. Now, on the invitation stationery side, and then Marcy, I'd have to see if you do the paper products the day of, you absolutely want to speak to how those are utilized. Like, do you need to be mindful of anything that's out with weather and things? With the cake person, it's going to be the buttercream question, of course. In July, why can't I have buttercream in July? It's like, you can. Kind of wedding cake soup if you do that.
Well, or you run it out for 15 minutes before and then run it back in.
Yeah, run it out. Yeah, but no one gets to see it.
Keep it in the freezer.
Yeah. Been there, done that. And so the question is, or this thing is, if you are in something that maybe isn't the most obvious, you have to take one extra step and say, how do I truly insert myself into this more general, what have you? And I think that's important because I get that pushback sometimes, understandably, stationary, photography, entertainment, and rentals. But I'm like, everyone has a place at the table. It's just, you have an added step to really have to ask yourself, how can I make this work?
Well, and, Marcy, obviously, I promote her constantly, not just for her invitation capabilities, because it's incredible, but her etiquette, because she's kind of our etiquette specialist on here.
Absolutely. And that's
to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And there might be times where you have to look beyond the wedding stuff too, because right now we're working, well, you've seen it, Keith, in the collective, but we were working with some really great lifestyle Friendsgiving, hosting Thanksgiving, social distancing of the holidays. And there's etiquette that comes out there too. There's some where they talk about, well, how do you, like, what's the etiquette with having people at your house and making sure they've tested, like that, it gets complicated. But, things like that. What's the etiquette for invitations that are for hybrid events, or we've changed it, or you were invited and now you're not because I can only have 10 people. Like,
that's a good one. And we could do
it's the reality, right? It's the reality of the life we're in right now. And so
that's actually something I'm going through with a wedding right now, is because we're having to invite people, and how do we go about doing that in a politically correct way and not make people feel bad, and I haven't even asked Marcy this question yet, so Marcy, that's coming.
So you got to noodle on that one, Marcy. But the big thing is, how do you insert yourself? And I'm going to tell you, I myself, 12 years ago, almost, I started OFD. There were very few people doing publicity. There was really one other company. There's still not a lot, but there was a ton of marketing. That was back in the day where some of the first people, you Book More Brides, Andy Ebon, all that. It was all marketing, sales, marketing. So I had to insert PR and convince people that PR needed to have a place at the table in order to be on Wedding Wire's blog, or they're not. And so people like Marcy will be doing the same sort of, heavy lifting.
Yeah. Tyler, do you have a question for her?
Well, I think most of my questions have been answered, but I have let's take another twist on this.
Yeah, I'm ready. Twist.
So I've done a lot of weddings where the brides are very dynamic, great writers, or hold great positions in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of them might be really great at promoting their wedding and their experience. And since most of our viewers are actually brides, what would you suggest for brides to get involved in their own publicity of their own wedding?
Ooh,
Tyler,
and help us.
You have no idea what a solid you've done for me right now, Tyler.
Right?
So I'm going to have to split you a $20 bill.
Question.
I'm glad you asked. Well, first of all, let me just say first, there has been an increased interest in couples who want to submit their own, because a lot of them are stuck at home. I've been a part of Facebook group. They're stuck at home, and they have more time in their hands. They want to revisit that. What have you. You have to make sure, of course, that the vendors are okay with it. That's a tough one, right? But I can't believe, I think I did this last time too, but now it's officially out. I haven't told anybody, so now I'm like, I'm about to say something.
Catch it here first, kids.
Oh my gosh, it's an exclusive.
Exclusive.
Who even knew? But so it's live right now. But I do have some folks who are testing the waters with it. I slowly rolled it out, but it's going to be out more out for Black Friday. But I own submitmywedding.com, and I have couples that have come to me saying, I want to submit my wedding. And I'm like, I'm not representing, that's just a policy. We don't represent couples. We represent the creative partners, involved in it. And I've never strayed from that, and I send them to somebody else. And so during this time, I thought, okay, I really need to jump in. I've been sitting on this URL forever. So submitmywedding.com is actually live right now. And it's meant the first
comment.
Me neither. Well, now I'm like, man, he did a great job throwing that in there. So thanks, Tyler. But it's an education, basically. It's education based for couples, but we're rolling out planner specific, florist specific. We actually have modules for all the different kinds who could submit events. But so what it does is it educates them essentially on. So to answer your question, if they're doing it without Submit My Wedding, what they're going to want to do is give thought to where they'd like to see it and have a conversation immediately with their photographer who owns the copyright of the photos 99% of the time. Make sure that the planner hasn't submitted it, come with a very collaborative side of things, and then start really thinking about, based on the look of the wedding, the details, the style of photography, where is it going to be a fit? Now, I'm going to tell you, Tyler, one of the biggest uphill battles we see with couples is, you can imagine, I was in venues, right? I did a great wedding. What if a publication turns it down? I'm going to be bummed out because of the work I put into it, right? And that's how you guys are going to feel. But if you're a couple and it's the best day of your life, or so you feel at the time, you're going to be really offended if you're not picked up, because we have such rose-tinted, what's more than rose-tinted glasses? Because that's where a couple would be, because of the emotional pull of their wedding. They're not going to spend, like I do, years of my life looking at weddings, so they won't know. And so that's what they could do on their own. I will say with Submit My Wedding, we have literally a package for them where they download it and they immediately get me on a video for 3 minutes talking about the photographer relationship. And then they get a 70-minute tutorial. They get a 14-page guide that's very robust. They get all of our templates, and they get a publication grid. That's literally, here's a list of 200 plus blogs and publications we've researched, all the links. This is how you do it. And so if they want to educate them, they can go in that way. They can do the heavy lifting on their own though. And that's me saying they can DIY it. But the first thing they need to do is recognize contractually who owns the copyright, make sure they come at it with a collaborative heart so that we're not stepping on toes, right? Because the worst thing you do is like have the wedding pitched. One time there was this photographer who shall remain nameless, who hopefully isn't watching this, who got very excited and they pitched themselves to like the 3 local magazines in their own city, and they got in all of them, including the cover, and it was everywhere, and the editors were not happy. So you've got to be careful with that. Well, Tyler, thanks though, man. You really just that was a solid. I didn't expect.
And that actually leads me to a couple of things, because first of all, when I send out the questionnaire to my couples and say, look, I'm looking to get your wedding published, I loved it, and then they don't get picked, I always preface that conversation at the very beginning. It's like, look, they get thousands of submissions. This is a shot in the dark. I think you have a shot, but be aware that it may not make it, because the editor's eye is very different than.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I've got a whole page in my guide about what happens when you get rejected, because let's just put it out there. I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, yeah.
And the other part of that is, and I think this is where Tyler was going with this also, is celebrity weddings. Now, I've been lucky enough that I've Michelle Bateau, who's an up and coming comedian that was just on incredible stuff, that I did her wedding 10 years ago. I still have those shots and stuff, and she's been really lovely. Like, she's going to let me publicize it, because now she's got a name. But there's a lot of celebrities there that
I can speak to that.
Yeah, they're like, absolutely not. You're not publishing. How do you approach that? How do you approach that, et cetera?
Yeah. We've dealt with that. Not a ton though. I don't do a ton in the celebrity space. There are other people who do that more, but I have some experience at that. And so there's a few different ways that you go with it, right? Because there's so many different types of celebrities, right? You've got someone who is like super famous, and rightfully so. There's an NDA, and that's just the end of it. But hopefully you're being compensated more than fairly for your time, and just sob into your money, and you're fine. Like, that's what I say. Like, I was like, you're fine. They paid you $1 billion.
Looks like I'm not.
Yeah, I know. But typically there's a contractual agreement somewhere in there. And if you have someone at that total top tier, right? Like, I mean, if Brad Pitt got married, again, Brad Pitt's publicist is going to handle that. That's not going to be, but what you're going to want to do in your contract, and of course, get with a lawyer to really talk about this, but you want to make sure that whether they put it on Instagram, whether they submit it to People Magazine, that they're going to be credited. And if you're doing a celebrity wedding, you have to recognize, when you look at like a People magazine, just to give an example, typically the photographer, of course, will be credited. They may mention the venue, maybe the planner. You're not going to see much more than that, though. So you have to be realistic. Like Marcy, I hate to say it, it's going to be a real hard press to get that mentioned. It's the nature of that business and the reality of it. That's why you just make sure you ask for a good amount of money, as if it's a lot of work, and rightfully so, with that. But then there's going to be this other tier of celebrity where maybe they don't want their publicist handling it, or why don't you handle it? And that's where you might be able to get in with it. But here, I don't know how far you want me to get into the world of like celebrity weddings and all this, but
just touch on it, but
yeah, just to touch on it is you have to remember that it's all about exclusivity, and it's potentially about pre-pitching people as well. So we did a celebrity wedding that was gorgeous, and it was over the summer. We talked to a couple of outlets about it, and we were very clear about exclusivity. Everything had to run through the couple though, right? The actual celebrity here, in the midst here. And some places will commit immediately. Yes, we want it. We want X, Y, and Z. Some places will have to see the photos first. So it's a little bit of a dance. And that's what we had to do. We had a early maybe, but then a definite yes after elsewhere. But the one thing you have to remember is this, and just if you ever do anything of a person of note and you're in a position, because if it's an NDA, it's an NDA. But if it's on the table, you have to make sure the photographer is prepared to have 3 edited photos that night, period. From typically at the ceremony, that great shot is maybe when they're married and they're coming back down the aisle. That's a good place to get it, where you get their faces, because you don't want to be scooped. And so you need those immediately. Otherwise the guests will sit there with their phones going bloop, 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 and post them on Instagram, right? That happens. Then you have to make sure, and you need to get with it. Every outlet's going to be different. But I usually say, if a photographer's shooting on a Saturday night, if the editor wants it, I want 3 images that night, period. Edited, ready to go, blah. And then I would say some people within 24 hours, depending on the level, you need 30 images, diverse images from the wedding, fully edited. Some people, you might be able to work a couple days off and have it by like Monday morning, but you have to have a quick edit on 30. And then for some of these outlets, like let's say it was a StyleMePrettyBrides.com, maybe they want 100, but they're willing to give you like 4 days for it. So yeah, it's a dance. It's stressful and wonderful. There's a big win when you get it though. Like we got people and we were so excited about that. So we loved it. It was a beautiful wedding.
Well, and there's the what is it? Too Bright Lights? Is it Too Bright? I don't know where my brain is.
Too Bright Lights is a really great program for submitting. There's Too Bright Lights and there's also Matchology. We're members of both, and we have been since we were original members of both and very loyal to both. But when you're working with a celebrity, you pitch directly to the outlet. Like I found the celebrity editor, and if you're smart about what you put in the subject line and you say whose wedding it is, they're going to get back to you. They read the subject lines.
Interesting. Marcy, got a question?
I did actually. When you're putting together, whether you're a bride and you want to try to promote yourself, or you're an event planner or any other part of the industry, how is the best way to promote the information? Is it going to be a short amount of information, a long amount of information? What are they expected to put forth?
You mean for an event submission, maybe?
Yeah,
like a pitch. Like you're pitching.
So the pitch, I've actually learned a lot. We recently brought on Megan Acosta of Glamour and Grace blog, and she's full-time, starting Monday with us. It's amazing. And she's doing all of our real wedding. Yeah, you guys, I'm sure, getting to know each other well. And so, and Megan has really schooled me on keeping it short but sweet. Keep it to 2 to 3, but she'd probably say 2 brief paragraphs of the highlights. Go ahead and focus on what stood out on the day, any remarkable decor, styling points, moments. Of course, with a celebrity, you're going to go a little bit further into the story, right? Like how they met during this time of COVID, and like the celebrity wedding that we actually did, you talk a little bit about how things shifted because of COVID. People want that story. So that's why I would contend maybe you boost it to a 3rd paragraph so that you can get into that. But what aspects of it is going to make the most sense to share? What are the things that are going to be most interesting to readers? And what aspects of the wedding, which is why it's hard when you are the couple, because a couple, everything probably seems fresh and different and new and inspiring. Obviously, I'm more of a jaded publicist over here saying I've seen that before, but I have an editorial. We have an editorial eye, we all do. And so, but what stands out that could catch the attention? Like, what did they do differently? We had this wonderful submission that Moxie Bright Events did. I went to Martha Stewart Weddings and it had a yes within an hour. And what was amazing was her theme. The couple theme was Black love stories, and it was a sight. It was beautiful, well executed. You had pictures of the Obamas on one page. Like, it was just styled so well and so beautiful and so meaningful, and especially given in the times we were in. And so we did focus on that amazing theme. And it came with, of course, a gorgeous detailed day, and it came with beautiful photos. So it's the full package, but you have to determine what's going to stand out from the event that you truly feel will add value to a publication.
Well, and we have a local wedding planner, Jamie Lippman with Absolute Events. A little shout out to her because she's incredible. And her wedding was like blacks and dark maroons. And it was incredible. Visually, it was just incredible. And it would be something that I would want to see because it's not the norm. Like, how do you make these dark colors become sexy and romantic? And she spot on, man.
When I was told no a few weeks ago, if you remember.
No, but I mean, spot on. And, that was the kind of stuff that you as an event planner, I get excited about. Seeing somebody else successful and doing their thing is incredible.
Well, Keith, you bring it up. You said that's what gets me excited. So then I would challenge, that's great. That's a good test. And then I would in barometer. And then I would ask people, is that going to get other people excited? And oftentimes the answer is yes. And if it's not, then you figure out what the other angle is. I'm a heartbreaker. I poke holes in everything. And I'm like, that's not interesting, but you think it is. That's not it. But people, I think, hire me. People don't hire me to blow smoke. They want to know what's realistic.
You don't need to be a yes person. And the thing is that, and us as event professionals, we do the same thing with our clients, is that we don't sugarcoat stuff. Like, this is the reality of event planning. This is the things that you're going to deal with. And it's stressful. This is a stressful,
it pulls from my venue days. Yeah. I was a no person.
Right. And let's talk about COVID, awesome, because you brought that up.
I do.
Do we run the danger of timing ourselves? What am I trying to say? Of dating ourselves if we bring COVID into the conversation now that we're starting to think about like the next thing?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Every state is going to be different, right? There are some states, like California's on lockdown. Alabama, I feel like feels like it's not happening, like COVID's not happening. Like, it's just so we've got our, and that's not a hit on states. It's the reality. And I stand by that statement, and I understand that. I mean, I'm in a state, Virginia right now, where our numbers are the worst they've ever been. And they're trying to send our kids back to school. So like, everyone's reality and perception is a bit different. But if you look at the statistics, we are in the middle of COVID and we will be for the foreseeable future. So the content is still relevant. And so for event submissions, I am seeing editors say, yes, I do want your COVID weddings. I want to see how they shifted. I want to see the style and design and great photos. Don't hesitate to send that in. And I can't speak on behalf of the editors of the world, but if they have 60 days of content lined up, but then a great COVID wedding comes in that's timely, they're going to fit that in now and push a couple things back that are more evergreen. And I do see for the foreseeable future, you're going to see a mix of evergreen content versus COVID still. It's going to be a good, Keith, you've probably seen the collective. It's probably 75% evergreen now and 25% COVID. So there's still room at the table because there's still people navigating, and the scientific numbers show us that it's not going away. So we should still be talking about it.
And actually, the only reason I brought it up is because, we did two shows about wedding planning and stress during the age of COVID, and the shows actually covered just a lot about what stress is with wedding planning. And as I was thinking about like the future of the shows, and if somebody wants to listen to it, like let's say 6 months down the road, does the title date the material?
That's a great question. So when it comes to podcasts, I have found, again, anecdotally speaking, a lot of because we pitch to easily 30 to 40 different wedding industry related podcasts and shit, like all the different things, right? Different aspects and stuff. And we know that most of them want evergreen content at this point because of exactly what you're saying. Because if you think about it, if a blog is putting out content every single day, it doesn't hurt to have a COVID wedding. But for you, where people, the consumer goes back and listens, you're going to want more evergreen content.
Yeah. What makes a good guest?
Yeah. What makes good guest?
Yeah, because you talked about podcasts, and obviously all of us are starting to do more podcasts. In our little group here, we've been on the hosting side of it, which is very different, obviously.
Yeah.
And now, like I was just recently on a guest on Ask Sharif, which is an awesome podcast, by the way. If you're out there listening,
I always love adding to my list. So thank you.
Yeah, Ask Sharif. Like today, she had some incredible guests on, but again, what makes a good guest? If you're a wedding planner and you're asked to come on to a podcast, what things should you keep in mind as a
That's
guest?
a great question. I'm going to do it in two parts. The first part is, most of the time people will have to pitch to a podcast. You're going to see less so being asked unless there's like a pre-existing relationship. So part one is doing the research, listening to the podcast. Do they have guests regularly? What have they covered and what have they not? How can you lend to the conversation without repeating content they've had? You've got to have an honest conversation with yourselves about, the chemistry there. Do you listen to them and think, oh, this is too improv, this is too stuffy? Like, don't pitch yourself to something that you think won't be in line with personality. So that's part one. But let's say you've jumped over that and you've listened and you've agreed to, what have you. A few things you're going to do. One is you want to make sure you anticipate what their needs are for promotion. You want to make sure you have a bio, logo, headshot, all your URLs at the ready, right? And actually, that, Keith, because now that we're booking with you, we're sending you a one sheet of our clients, or we will be, right? So we anticipate what you're going to need and we send it to you. Ask them if they're, say, hey, would you, and we did this with you actually, do you want some suggested questions, or you guys, because some places, they do all their own research. Some places are more off the cuff, but other people, like Keith, you said, hey, yeah, I'll grab them. Like, because some of these things, like you talked about bringing Christy Osborne on from Outside Media. her expertise is so specific that it would benefit that you have questions from her. And so they provide those things.
And I can work those questions in. That's the nice thing.
Exactly. And then, to really go ahead of time, if you're not familiar with podcasts, don't be cocky about it. Ask for a test run on it. Like you came to me for the first time and said, I want to come on. And I think it was like a bunch of minutes early the first time. And I said, well, I've used StreamYard. Can we meet in the middle because of my schedule at 10 or 15 minutes out? And this time we did it with 5 minutes to go, but they need to be willing to give a little. And finally, they need to know that they need a quiet room. They need to have great Wi-Fi and frankly, great equipment. Like if you're doing this as a one-off, that's great. But I purposely bought a great camera because we're in the pandemic and I needed one. I have my Yeti mic. I have these fun things on today because I just felt it drowned out the noise and whatever. It matched my shirt, so I did it. But they need to have the right equipment. Yeah. So you want someone who's engaging, on time, and just understands how the show runs. I don't want them surprised by like, oh, I didn't know you were going to ask me my favorite book. And they're like, I sent you the question and told you we always ask this. So that's what it's all about. It's a laundry list, but it can be done.
So listen, I'm shot in the wide today and I haven't for how many episodes? So I mean, controversial, but yet brave. So,
but your eye makeup is flawless, and as soon as you came on, I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "I have my little lippy today."
11:30. Ask him what I look like then.
Oh my god!
I rolled right out of bed.
I threw the lippy on, but I saw the eyes, and I went, "Oh, I wish I had 2 minutes." Like, you look great. So
thank you. This is for you. I knew New York Times got canceled, so this was solely for you, mostly for me, but solely for you. The lashes are always for Marcy.
What's for me? What's for me?
New York Times didn't actually cancel
public television.
So just FYI, New York Times didn't cancel. We rescheduled them for December 8th.
Pardon me, yes.
Yeah, because of the elections, obviously.
The elections took longer. Yeah, so, it changes the news cycle.
So Nicole with New York Times will be with us on December 8th. But talking about future guests, can you give us a little breakdown? Because I've got 3 guests that are booked through you that are going to be on Behind the Veil over the next, 60 days. Emily Sullivan, is going to be on. Can you tell us a little bit about Emily and like what makes her special and why,
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I could sing everybody's praises here. So Emily Sullivan, what you need to know is that I've known her for like almost a decade. I love her. And so Emily Sullivan, you guys will get along very well. She's very no nonsense. She makes things beautiful, but she gets to the point. She's got that practical side, that get it done side. She's based in New Orleans, leading destination wedding planner down there. And she'll be she's talking micro weddings. So you have to remind me on these, but, and so Emily started doing, I know everyone's like, oh, micro weddings, that's all the rage. Well, Emily's been doing it for over 4 years. So she found this opportunity in her market. I remember, we've been friends, but we've worked together forever. And she came to me and was like, I'm seeing more people want to do destination weddings. I'm seeing more people do destination weddings on weekdays. And like, what do you think? And so she went for it, intimate weddings, and she's killed it. Like, I'm just so proud of everything that she's done, when she's come to that. And so Emily's just got a great heart and she's very giving of her information. So I know a lot of people talk about micro weddings and like the sexy side of micro weddings, but if you guys went on here and asked her all the practical questions that people should know, she's going to be the one to do it. She's actually speaking at Wedding MBA digitally this week about it as well. So you're in for a treat.
Well, and the reason I brought her up and this leads back to PR, Emily had to start somewhere. Obviously, she wasn't always a speaker. She didn't come out of speaking engagements. How does somebody get to that point? How, if you're
oh my God, she had the story.
How do you
call my name?
Step?
So Emily came to me. She's gonna go, I can't believe this. I was speaking at TSC like 8 or 9 years ago, and she came up to me and hand out very she's like, my name is Emily, and I built up my business really big, and then I decided this isn't what I wanted, so I fired everyone. I got rid of my storefront, and I'm starting over. And I'm like, you're fascinating, and that's like literally the first. I've only known you 10 seconds, so we got to know each other. And we started incrementally. And then we saw that, and she enjoyed educating. She, because you start small, right? You start with panels, you start with podcast, like you just start with those things. She had a natural knack. She'd already done TV a ton on her own accord. She was it was a natural step. So we started pitching her to some things, and people really loved her. And I'll never forget, like, when you could look back, not to be all gushy about it, she's going to roll her eyes, I'm sure, at me, but if she heard this, hopefully she didn't hear it, but she did well for years, but there was a turning point several years ago at Wedding MBA where she hit her stride, and I was in the room to see it. And that's literally one of my favorite moments in my career. It always will be, where she was up on stage and she started really embracing a storytelling approach. And then it was like that. She's got it. Like, she's been good, but now she's really excellent. And so, yeah, she's just, we've worked with her for years, and she's a hard worker. And, she's a single mom who does a great job balancing work and home, and she'll hit the road when she needs to. And, she'll do these things. And so she's chipped away at it for many years. I have a great deal of respect, and I just adore her. I mean, literally spring break last year, I went to visit, my whole family went to visit her in New Orleans. That's how much I like her.
I mean, okay, New Orleans. Hello. I mean,
I know, but her, like, she and her family, I just love them so much. So,
well, and that kind of leads me to the next thing. Is like, what makes a good speaker? Because I find that when I speak to groups, having a personal one-on-one, giving personal stories, giving that insight helps me. But again, if you're like a Marcy or Brooke or Tyler, because we're all in this beginning stage, we're all starting to get into our PR groove. How do you get to a point that you feel comfortable on stage? What are the kind of
Yeah, no, that's great. You start incrementally, right? You start incrementally, and you start with just learning to talk about, like, being on podcasts, being interviewed on podcasts, doing Facebook Lives, starting to find opportunities to sit on panels is a great way. I would tell people, find speakers you admire and watch them on stage. Now, right now, again, pushing Wedding MBA for a second, it's digitally right now. You can access, if you, as many people do, I think the world of Alan Berg, he's an amazing speaker. If that's your jam, watch him, but with a critical eye, and say, what makes him so great on stage? What makes, whomever so great on stage? And start to, you don't want to adopt exactly what they're doing, but start watching people. David Caruso, he's wonderful on stage, and see what the themes are there. For those people, some people do Toastmasters, some people do their own continuing education, which is great, but I say start incrementally, and you're going to find over time what makes you on stage. For me, I somehow inject humor. I don't know where it comes from. I try not to be too hardy-har, but that's kind of a thing I've watched myself kind of evolve over time, and I start to leverage that more. So everyone's a little bit different. I take a storytelling approach. People like that. So you yourself will find things that people respond to, and then you start working on it. But it takes a great deal of work to get. I mean, Emily's been doing this 8 years. I've been doing it 12, 14 years, I would say.
So,
and if they're not a good storyteller, what other approaches would be best off to handle? I mean, some people just aren't a storyteller. Is there, they're more informative and they're more educational.
So you can go on a stage, and because not everyone is on that. Like, for example, I'm not inspirational. I'm just going to say, I don't go on stage and inspire. I'm there to inform, and I use storytelling. But other people might have very dynamic case studies. They may have, I know statistics don't sound sexy, but it's the way you present it. If you've got that energy on stage, if you've got you take the time to have some really great branded slides, you find other ways to present, you bring in great video and things along those lines. As long as you're engaging and you find ways to connect to the next audience, to that audience, that's how you're going to do it. But believe it or not, it's a lot of, and Marcy, I would also contend too, I mean, you, of course, have been to many events over the years, and you and I have both been involved with these for years. Keep in mind, you being on stage is a big part of it, but I would also contend it's the cocktail hour ahead of time where you're meeting people in the room and you're engaging and asking questions, and the follow-up after and the Q&A, like all of that is a big package. So it's not just being on stage, but statistics, how you present them, can be engaging to the audience, and that works as well.
Yeah. How about you, Tyler? Got a follow-up question for that? He's like, no.
We can talk about cocktail.
I just disagree.
Yeah,
that you're
cocktail
not,
hours some more.
I think you're very inspirational.
Thank you.
Just watching you, how you're doing this has been learning for me personally. for
Well,
sure.
because you feel very natural, Megan. When we talk to you, I feel like we've been your best friend for like
Oh, you're
And
forever.
sweet.
listen, the first episode, I was like, Keith and I spoke.
Oh yeah, I felt like you and I had a good thing
How
going.
many plugs she did, and I was just like, oh, she is the best, because I think there was like 26 plugs in like 14 seconds. I was like, ooh,
Hopefully I didn't overdo it though. I try not to.
No.
No, it was
My lashes
honestly,
were
it
curled
was
all by
a-
themselves.
Oh, you're so
you
sweet.
were perfect.
My
yes.
concern today, y'all, was I had a lot of coffee this morning, and I was like, "Oh, I should not have done that because my clip is so much faster." But the thing is, some people are. I take after my dad. My dad is naturally wonderful on stage. He's a great presenter. He's got a great personality. I take after like that comfort level on stage. That's not everybody to start, but you can incrementally work to that. I've seen people do, like I said, Emily's always been great on stage, but once Emily found that the storytelling approach was the way to go,
Right.
I mean, she killed it. She kills it every time. So
So
I think-
so I have a question: podcast or web show? What? Because we started off as a Facebook Live show, and now we're converting over to a podcast, and so that's a completely different audience.
Yeah, it's a different format. I think it's different strokes for different folks. I mean, do you mean in terms of pitching to them, or do you mean being a part of them?
Just because obviously, a lot of because we're going to go back to the PR idea, is that a lot of this is just starting to get your name out there and just to start talking. Do you feel like the world of podcast is an easier world to get into, or do you feel
I think podcasts are consumed more often than web shows. I have no statistics to back that, but I feel in our industry, because a podcast you can listen to in the car, you can listen to while you're driving, you're traveling, what have you, but it takes more. Like video is huge, and I know that. Like I get that.
Podcasts, you don't get this. So.
But podcasts,
You know what I mean?
I know. No. Like from your lips, absolutely. But I would say when it comes to getting your name out there versus starting a web show versus starting a podcast, I would say a podcast is probably going to open more doors for you early on, But you bring up good point, Brooke, too, is that a web show will absolutely be able to showcase things that people don't normally get to see as well.
Well, and Brooke, I was just actually telling Brooke today because she decorated her place, in Christmas, and some of the stuff she just came up with was honestly brilliant. And so I said, why don't you do a live feed of what you're doing here? Because, she took everyday things that you can find at, a regular store and dressed them up, did them in a way that
smoke and mirrors, drags, baby.
Well, that's what you said. Yeah, smoke.
When I impressed Keith when he walked in, he's like, I said, girl.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I love it.
I'm gonna be done in a few days, and then we'll do a chat, and I'll do a thing. So.
Oh, good, because I really think that. But if you're just a human being out there, a person that's out there, and let's say that you work for a Hyatt or a Hilton, and you're the catering manager or director of catering, first of all, do you think PRs can be done on that level? And what are some things that people need to watch out for? I know that if I was at Ritz-Carlton and I was representing Ritz-Carlton, there's a whole bunch of legal.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost, I don't want to turn this down, but like as someone who worked in hotels, you have to let the person who's the publicist for the property handle that. That is just, there are a lot of benefits for working for a property. I used to get health insurance covered by them. They would pay you every 2 weeks. Like it's a pretty good deal when you're working for somebody else, right? But you cannot be almost ever the spokesperson unless you were a boutique hotel that doesn't have the rules and regulations. Places like Marriott, Ritz-Carlton. I worked at the Jefferson Hotel in Richmond. We were never quoted in anything because that's being handled by the higher ups. You know what I mean? Right. So there's no opportunity there, unfortunately. And even if you, and I'm going to guess on this a little bit, but even when it comes to your own personal branding, if you want to go do podcast episode, you would have to ask a lot of people and agree to a lot of things. And I think most wouldn't be keen on it because, podcasts, you can't control every question being asked at you. I mean, you could, but it's hard. So it's just, it's just not a
live. So,
I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the next 7 minutes, right?
I always said the last 7 minutes is the best part of the show.
The best part of it. And so, it's not a priority for the individual working for them. You let the publicity team, and there's pros and cons to that, of course, right? If you're someone who wants to have more of a hand in it, then you have to ask yourself whether that's the right fit for you. But there's a lot of reasons to keep a job other than, you know what I mean? You just got to be realistic about what makes sense.
What's the number one mistake people make in this
With
one?
press, I would say pitching blindly. You're not. I'm like, do you mean in life?
Yeah,
Not wearing a
focus
mask.
like on, somebody, what's
Yeah.
the number one
It's
mistake?
pitching blindly, not taking people think that PR, you just have this megaphone and you're pitching all the time, but it's understanding. You don't pitch a podcast without listening to what Keith has covered. Like, you don't have to. I would love for someone to listen to all 30 of these, right? But even if they get a better feel of it ahead of time and not pitch, well, I'd love to do publicity. You're like, hello, Megan Ely did that. Well, she's done it twice at this point. Why would you pitch that? That's a mistake people make. They pitch things, or they'll pitch something to someone where it has, like, maybe they would pitch to you, Keith. I'm just making this up, but I'm the leading bar and bat mitzvah, whatever. And you're like, well, it's behind the veil. It's not. It makes sense. Like, how do you mix those two together? And so making sure you're pitching appropriately. People do that all the time. It drives people crazy.
So that was my question that I was trying to jump in here with, is how do you find your audience when you got a passion, you got a subject, and you got something you really want to speak about?
That's a great question.
How do you find the right audience? How do you pitch to the right people?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, to know the audience, you need to get that out too. Usually you can answer, right? Your engaged couples in Florida, my peers, planners in a position to refer business to me. So you answer that first. And then the question is, what media are they consuming? Because that's where I need to go. And so sometimes it's a matter of asking customers, colleagues off the cuff, running some searches on Google. Our couples, if it's couples, it's brides.com, Martha Stewart Weddings, it's The Knot, it's Wedding Wire. Those guys are, of course, combined now. If it's B2B, it's going to be Special Events, Cater Source, Wedding Planner Magazine. I mean, there's a million of all of them, right? And you get more specific as you go. And from there, once you've narrowed down, this is my audience, this is the media that they're consuming. And let's say you said, what if you've got a great idea? Then you go to these sites, you go to Martha, you go to Brides, you go to any of these places that have articles and start typing in some keywords. Maybe you and Tyler are making this up. Maybe it's rentals. Maybe it's destination weddings. You type in destination weddings and you find the common denominator. Who are the writers assigned to that beat? Who talks about style, decor, trends, gift guides, whatever that is? You find that writer, you take time to get to know what they write about, and that's who you pitch. That's how you do it. It's a lot of steps, but you get there.
Megan, I know that you have like the next thing that you got to go to like right after this. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. So I just want to say thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Sites with us. By the way, if you look on the screen, if you go to ofdconsulting.com/behind-the-veil- you will get a list of all the things that we talked about on this episode and the previous episode.
Yep.
So, check that out. You definitely want to go check it out. And again, I can't thank you enough. We have some great future guests that are coming.
Yeah, you've got Dixie and Renee and Emily. I'm so excited. So
I am too, because they have some really great stuff. And then, of course, that we also have Karen Lee, the owner of Wedding Expo, that's coming on, and as well as Sandy, the CFO of All Seated, is actually already booked for this show over the next 60 days. So it's going to be incredible. But I just, again, want to say thank you so much for being a part of it. And if you're watching this live, go to our YouTube channel, Keith Willard Events / I don't know why the backslash is thing, but it is. Or you can find us on iTunes or Spotify or Pandora. Just look for Behind the Veil with Keith Willard. We're one of 550,000 podcasts out there. So the more you have, the better.
But we are the best wedding podcast of 2020.
Yes, actually one of the top wedding podcasts of 2020. Thank you.
Yeah, congrats. That's awesome. I saw that.
Incredible. So again, thank you, Marcy Gutenberg with An Affair to Remember, Tyler Black with Cachet Events, of course, the always gorgeous Brooke Logan Stoner, and Megan Ely with OFD Consulting. You were amazing. Thank you guys so much.
You guys are wonderful. You have a great day. Take care. Thank you.
You too.
Happy 30th, everyone.